session, your space. Whenever I find something related to sexuality and health, I might just share the reading, but it's just additional reading to help you better understand tout ce qu'il y a à apprendre dans Sexuality and Health. Donc, vous avez déjà votre assignment. Ce que je vais vous conseiller, c'est de commencer à lire la question et just brainstorm ideas and then read the related articles. J'ai mis plein d'articles sur narrative therapy in Unit 4. Donc, il y a pas mal de lectures. Lisez parce que tous les points sont dans ces articles. Ce sont des articles clés, au fait. Surtout the one by Coombs, different ideas and how to proceed with narrative therapy. So everything is in your reading articles. Lisez, use highlight to pour souligner tout ce qui est vous trouvez que c'est intéressant, que vous pouvez utiliser. Donc, ça, c'est how to proceed. You read the articles, you highlight the main points, the keywords, et puis relisez the assignment, and then try to brainstorm, and then it becomes easier, so you don't miss points. You don't miss key points, I mean. Ça, c'est un peu ça. Et puis, avant de commencer, bon, we will do Unit 4, which is, c'est quelque chose qui peut être lourd pour certaines personnes, parce que we deal with trauma. Sometimes it triggers our own experiences, because trauma is something, c'est pas l'événement qui fait le trauma. Enfin, on va aller en détail, c'est juste pour vous dire, we will be doing sexual abuse, but we will talk about trauma. So it might trigger some of you. Donc, essayez de prendre deep breath. Just open the window. Sometimes just look at the window. Et puis, essayez de prendre des notes to remain active while you're learning. What else? And I will try to slow down whenever I'm so excited by this field of trauma, so I can get quite, comment dire, je peux aller très vite, donc je vais ralentir aussi. If you have questions or anything, you just write in the chat, or just prenez la parole, parce que des fois, quand je fais présentation, je ne vois pas ce qui est écrit. Et si vous n'entendez pas, vous voyez que ça continue, faites-moi savoir. Donc, I will hit the record button and we will start for our second session in Sexuality and Health. So, if you can grab your manual and some sheets to be more active, parce que moi aussi, quand je vois quand je suis une classe, mais on est très passif, we get lost sometimes. So be more active, either your manual or the chapter, the concerned chapter, and some sheets to jot down some ideas. Donc, dans votre manuel, la définition de childhood sexual abuse is given. There are two definitions, or one. Donc, le National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect define child abuse as contact or interactions between a child and an adult. Because it is childhood sexual abuse, it's between a child and an adult. when the child is being used for the sexual stimulation of a perpetrator or another person. Sexual abuse may also be committed by a person under the age of 18. Donc, pas que adult. It is contact or interaction between a child and an adult, but also it can be between a child and another older child, when that person is significantly older than the victim, or when the perpetrator is in a position of power or control over another child. Quand on parle de significantly older, we don't define by age, but there is a significant gap between, like, say, someone in the lower primary and someone in the secondary school. Donc, it is a contact between a child and an adult, or contact between a child and an older child. Et ce qui implique qu'il y a le power and control over that child, over, we say victim or we say survivor. To empower the victim, we call it survivor of abuse. Donc, dans la définition de sexual abuse, donc sexual abuse can happen in the family. Vous savez, family is the primary social socialization. Mais abuse can start in the family, the caregivers. But it can also be extrafamilial, ça veut dire que c'est outside of the family. It can involve contact activities, c'est-à-dire stimulation, physical stimulation, or it can be non-contact activities like allowing a child to view pornographic activities. Donc, dans la définition, il y a familial, extrafamilial, contact, non-contact. Et dans la définition, the definition also highlights the exploitation of adult authority. C'est-à-dire there is abuse of adult authority. And it addresses the advantage of the perpetrator over the child. See the keywords. We use perpetrator as the one who commits the abuse, and victim or survivor for the one who will experience the abuse. Là, c'est une définition pour childhood sexual abuse. Now, if you define sexual abuse, say it's similar without consent, but it's not between a child and an adult. It's between two adults without consent, and it becomes just sexual abuse. Again, it can be intrafamilial in couple, or extrafamilial, like strangers, for sexual abuse with adults. In your manual, you will find some of the effects of childhood sexual abuse. So childhood sexual abuse have various effects because we are talking about a traumatic experience. Chaque personne montre certains effets. C'est plus prononcé pour certains, but these are what studies have found. Studies on childhood sexual abuse have found basically these are the main symptoms. Et puis on a étudié aussi la différence entre women and men. What's the effect on men? What's the effect on women? Why there are differences? Avant d'aller en détail, pourquoi vous pensez qu'il y aura des différences? Abuse is an abuse. Why will there be differences between male and female? Là, on peut se baser sur notre connaissance de socialization, how men, women are socialized differently, expectations, like men are expected to man it up, not to cry, not to show their emotions. And women, girls are allowed or given space to express their emotions. Donc, à la base, c'est un peu la socialisation qui fait qu'il y a une différence entre the long-term or short-term effect of childhood sexual abuse. Là, j'ai mis long-term effect. S'il y a long-term effect, il y a aussi short-term effect. Short-term effect, imagine whenever there's a traumatic experience, how short-term effect, what are the short-term effect? Comment on est perturbé immédiatement? Like we can't concentrate, we can't sleep, we can't eat. These are short-term effects of any trauma that we might have experienced. Now, the long-term effect of childhood sexual abuse. Studies have shown that child sexual abuse is linked to an increased level of general psychological distress. Ça veut dire que, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire general psychological distress? C'est un peu comme le stress, but we are more on the stress mode. We have difficulty to cool down and relax. So there is a general psychological distress. We stay on the on mode. S'il y a le stress curve, we are on, like, on est un petit peu en dessus. We'll go in detail, but just think about studies have shown that child sexual abuse is linked to an increased level of psychological distress, to depression, to anxiety. Quand on parle de anxiety, ça peut être un general anxiety, comme on dit. Un general anxiety is like, c'est généralisé, c'est pas spécifique. Spécifique, c'est par exemple, we have certain phobias. Phobia to la poussière, phobia de ne pas sortir, phobia d'être en groupe, panic disorder, or obsessive symptoms. Et puis long-term post-traumatic effect. Quand on parle de long-term post-traumatic effect, c'est un petit peu, comment dire, en d'autres mots, on parle de PTSD. PTSD, c'est Before Post-Traumatic Disorder, Stress Disorder, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, PTSD. C'est ça le long-term post-traumatic effect, on appelle ça PTSD, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Ça veut dire que let me see. I've got the notification. Oui, une question pour John.
Bonjour madame. Allô?
Oui, je vous entends.
Et en fait, est-ce que bipolar disorder et personality, bipolar personality disorder, est-ce que c'est post-traumatique qui par personne gagne ça?
Je vous entends pas trop bien, très clairement. I know that what you mentioned was that difference between personality disorder, bipolar disorder. Bon, mettez dans le chat, comme ça je peux lire et vous répondre par la suite. Because it's a specific question. And it will require a specific answer or just general, because differences we'll have to dwell into specifics. Just jot down in the chat. Thank you. Let me share again. We on parlait de PTSD, but this, when we talk about the trauma theory, we'll go in detail. Donc, la différence entre men et women. Women who were sexually abused as children are more likely to report a lifetime prevalence of substance use and abuse. Quand on parle de substance, ça englobe alcohol and drug. Donc, they are more likely to indulge into substance use and abuse, be it alcohol and drug, than women who are not abused. A study of childhood sexual abuse on boys shows similar effects experienced by women, such as self-concept disturbance, c'est-à-dire un peu the self-esteem, the self-image, and somatic complaint. Somatic, c'est-à-dire physical complaint. Donc, boys show similar effects as women, such as self-image problems, physical complaint, but males tend to externalize behaviors. Quand on parle de externalize behaviors, c'est l'agressivité, conduct disturbances, acting out sexual behaviors, tout ce qui est aggressive behavior, sexual behavior that are more visible, c'est-à-dire c'est ça qu'on appelle externalized behaviors. Par contre, internalized behaviors, c'est plus ce qui est intérieur comme depression, anxiety, we call it internalized behaviors. Donc, boys tend to show difficulties with self-image and physical complaint, just like women, but they show more externalized behaviors, c'est-à-dire conduct disturbances, plus d'agressivité, and also acting out sexual behaviors. Donc, abuse situation characteristics. Donc, qu'est-ce qui est plus dangereux c'est quand the sexual abuse involves these things. For instance, force, violence, threats. When there is a father figure. Father figure, ça peut être le père, le beau-père, le grand-père. It's a father figure. When there is invasive sexual activities. Invasive veut dire penetrative sexual activities. Donc, quand il y a ces trois choses-là, it's more dangerous. Dangerous as in how damaging it is to the victim or survivor. And the survivor may live with how we call complex trauma. C'est-à-dire que le trauma, we can treat it with specific therapy, but still they will have to manage certain feelings, certain triggers, and they will need lots of support. Et childhood sexual abuse, on voit que il y a aussi d'autres childhood maltreatment. It's not just the abuse, there is maltreatment, like psychological abuse, manipulative, manipuler l'enfant pour garder le secret, par exemple, or physical abuse, or threatening to hurt their close ones if they speak out, or psychological abuse, threatening to reject them, to abandon them, or hitting them, punching, frightening, using a weapon. Donc, childhood sexual abuse is not just one-time abuse. It's not just the actual abuse. It can be also psychological, emotional, like grooming the child before the abuse. C'est-à-dire que l'amener à penser que l'enfant aussi voulait cet abuse. Let me see your comments. Donc, la question de Ashna is, does bipolar disorder and BPD occurs post a traumatic event? Chaque personne est différente et aussi the abuse, if it happens early, c'est-à-dire quand l'enfant est petit, avant 5-6 ans, where they are still, they need, l'attachement est important, développement de their brain structure. Là, il peut qu'il y ait the traumatic event peut causer des dommages irréversibles and can provoke certain disorders like dissociative disorder. On va pas dire bipolar personality disorder parce que de psychothérapeutes, certains pensent que, on pense que when there is a trauma in the early years of a child, such that l'enfant n'a pas encore formé des structures dans son cerveau, certaines structures, et le trauma vient bousiller quelque chose que l'enfant n'arrive pas à, ces structures n'arrivent pas vraiment à associer each other, que l'enfant va développer certains troubles par la suite, qui est irréversible. Il y a des traitements, mais des traitements, c'est pas une cure. We just be treating parce que le mal a été fait. C'est pour ça qu'on dit the first few years of a child, they need trusted adults, they need an attachment with their caregivers. Parce que certains troubles, s'ils apparaissent depuis l'enfance, on sait qu'il y a quelque chose dans l'environnement. Sometimes therapists won't give, for instance, un diagnostic de personality disorder parce que if you do a history of a client, you will see there has been a major trauma. Donc, des fois, there is some kind of confusion, like we say it's personality disorder, but en réalité, c'est plus un trauma qui a causé, qui a fait ces réactions. But this is more about a clinical aspect, clinical psychology. Let me zoom. Okay. Donc, Vinesh nous dit, can boys who are victims of sexual abuse, be at a later stage of their life, become themselves sexual predators? Les études ne disent pas que, voilà, parce que sometimes, il y a des écoles de pensée, some say it's a choice because you choose to do, to act. It's a choice. It's not like they will automatically become sexual predators, because those who have been victims, they want to heal. Enfin, pas tout le monde, mais some of them want to heal. And for the healing process, ils veulent pas que d'autres personnes aussi subissent la même chose. Donc, it's not automatically like someone who has been abused will become comment on dit ça? Will also commit abuse. en même temps, those who have experienced like physical abuse or other types of abuse or other trauma, they may show certain behavior issues, certain like externalized behaviors, comme j'ai dit. Externalized behaviors is like acting out, sexual behaviors, etc. Mais il y a différentes écoles de pensée. C'est pas automatique de dire que because they have been abused, they will become predators. No. Parce que si on prend different theories, one theory say that cognitive aspect, we think, we build schemas. Maintenant, si les schemas sont faulty, how we think about issues, then we might act accordingly. See how you have formed your schema about sexual behavior. Is it a positive one? Is it a healthy one? Or what schema for sexual activity is more perverted? Votre manuel met l'accent sur male survivors, sur la page 69 à 70. Parce que whenever you read about sexual abuse, it's more about studies on female survivors. Donc, male and female survivors, male and female responses to child sexual abuse are similar. There's guilt and shame and anger. Donc, voyez la différence entre guilt and shame. Guilt is about something you have done wrong. Shame is about self. Feel shameful about ourselves. Alors que guilt, c'est plus sur le behavior que vous avez. Peut-être vous pensez, like the survivor will think that maybe they have done something to get this, feeling guilty about their behavior. Shame is how you feel about yourself. You feel dirty. You feel really bad about yourself. Donc, guilt, shame, and anger for being weak. C'est ça ce qui ressent. Donc, male and female responses are similar, guilt, shame, and anger. Socialization of male and female differs. Ça, on a vu. It is expected that male will be confronted with different sexist biases, exhibit gender-specific presentation of symptoms. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Ça veut dire male don't cry, male don't express their emotions. This is socialization. Par contre, peut-être maintenant, de nos jours, avec tout ce qu'on lit, maintenant, il y a plus d'espace for both male and female to express themselves. But still, there is these expectations from society that male should not cry, you're a boy, should not cry. Même quand on est en train de pacifier, like calm down a child, we can resort to that stereotype, like, you should not cry, you're a little boy. Donc, how we socialize male and female, it impacts on how they present their symptoms, how they express themselves. Donc, dans le manuel, Struve identified 9 factors that may have an impact on the presentation of male survivor. By failing to acknowledge the male's view, and by working from a program model of victimization based mostly on women's experiences, we counselors could increase the male survivor's sense of isolation and alienation. Et ce que ça veut dire, c'est que dans la littérature, on se concentre sur female survivors at the expense of male survivors. So we should be acquainted with the symptoms, the presentation of a male survivor, and how stereotypes can hinder counseling. C'est-à-dire quand on dit stéréotypes, on avait vu des différents stéréotypes qu'il y a, que ce soit à la maison, au travail, dans la société. Comment ça peut empêcher le healing process of both male and female survivors. Any question? Let me check your manual. Donc, pour résumer entre-temps, in the DSM-5, you have different disorders. Mais seulement avant de diagnostiquer, we don't just on ne fait pas qu'un diagnostic basé sur les symptômes. Sinon, ça va être robotique. Like, oh, you have these symptoms. Maybe you have depression. Or, on cherche, c'est pour ça que c'est important de faire le assessment. On cherche, on fait le history of a person to know what's triggering that. If, for instance, they have been through loss, they are grieving, or there has been trauma. À ce moment, on a une idée qu'est-ce qui peut contribuer à la présentation de ces symptômes-là. When we have this idea, then depending on our expertise, then we try to work on those aspects that fall under our purview. Et si certains vous voyez que bon, c'est au-delà de votre capacité, à ce moment, vous référez au psychologue, au psychiatre qui travaille avec la personne. Faire un diagnostic comme ça, on ne peut pas faire vraiment un diagnostic facilement sans prendre en compte les circonstances qui ont amené à la présentation de ces symptômes. Donc, child abuse.
Madame,
Oui,
j'ai une petite question.
oui.
Disons qu'il y a un enfant, a child victim, have been treated regarding a particular trauma. Can there be, can the trauma come again in his later life when he or she is an adult? When they exposed to same particular circumstances?
Alors, pour exprimer, laissez-moi prendre un whiteboard pour... Ok. Auparavant, on pensait que trauma was something big. Only those who have been abused or experienced near-death experience went through trauma, or those who have experienced accidents or seen people die before them. Mais maintenant, dans la littérature, je veux dire, tout ce qui est traumatologie, clinical, tout ça, we say trauma, there is small trauma, small t trauma, and big T trauma. Small T, so it's small. Ça veut dire that trauma is not the event that happened to you. Donc, small T trauma or those trauma. Donc, quand je parle là, if you feel triggered, like I said, take some deep breath, look at the window, or just stand up because no one's seeing you. Just stretch a little bit. Ça peut vous aider. Donc, small T trauma are those, par exemple, que vous pouvez experience at work, maybe, when, say, your boss is demeaning you in front of your colleagues, and you feel yourself sinking, you feel like the heat in your face, or you feel your heart beating faster, or your palms sweaty, like you go blank, and sometimes it can affect your mood, your sleep, your appetite. Oh, you can't see on the blackboard. Okay. Can you see now? Okay. Donc, small T are those that you can experience. But then after a week or two, you might feel okay. These are small T trauma. You might feel okay, but there has been something, peut-être que ça a été dans votre cerveau, ça a créé quelque chose. Maybe when you experience you had another experience with someone who humiliates you, and you experience the same thing, immobilized, or your heart goes faster, sweaty palm, you're lost in your thoughts, etc. Donc, it might trigger something. Donc, these small T traumas, it can happen to anyone. The big T trauma, the big T, like the trauma with a big T, or the experience of sexual abuse, car accident, like mass shooting, wars, etc. Ça, ce sont des big traumas. Les traumas, en réalité, c'est pas the event that happened to you. It's not the accident that you seen next to your house or anything. It's what happened to you inside. Ça veut dire le trauma, c'est quand une personne vraiment se sent, c'est-à-dire they are unable to cope. Like usually when they are stressed, we are able to cope. Peut-être on est un petit peu stressé, but then we bounce back. But trauma is something like you have to mobilize more resources to get back on track. Ça, c'est le big trauma. Maintenant, est-ce qu'une personne who experiment a traumatic, is it big or small, if they have been treated with trauma-related therapy, il y a des thérapies ou il y a des sessions qui peuvent traiter ça, ça veut dire que peut-être ça va pas revenir, même even if they re-experience something like that, because when you have been healed of a trauma, there are different modalities that work with trauma. If the person have been healed, they might get the picture of the abuse, for instance, but it won't, ça va pas éveiller sa peur, par exemple, ça va pas ramener cette expérience dans son cerveau. C'est comme une image qu'on voit. It's just like a snapshot of that experience, but it's an image without feeling. C'est ça when someone has been treated for their trauma. But it depends, sometimes, ça dépend quel âge la personne était, ça dépend if there was support around that person, caregivers were around to, parce que s'il y a support around, it might not be traumatic. You might see that traumatic, but see, there were coping mechanisms like parents, caregivers were around that person, they might not have experienced it as a traumatic experience in the sense that parce que you were able to regulate that person. Je vais revenir dessus quand je vais faire tout à l'heure le Windows of Tolerance on how caregivers, c'est-à-dire les parents, par exemple, si un enfant have been through some traumatic experience and you were there, like you hug them, vous avez essayé de communiquer avec eux, rassurer. It helps them to co-regulate. Qu'est-ce que c'est quoi co-regulate? Quand on ne peut pas regulate our own self, like we are so scared we can't regulate our own selves, we have someone who is calm, regulated, like they talk to you, they hug you, they calm you down, then your system will cool down because your nervous system is getting this, c'est-à-dire il y a un genre de mirroring qui va faire que vous allez vous calmer un petit peu. C'est ceci qui est important, au fait. S'il y a la présence des personnes aimantes to help us co-regulate, à ce moment-là, ça peut calmer le système. Yes, there's only 2 lines. There's only 2 lines because I'm talking. More, I'm explaining. Quand j'écris, c'est plus par rapport à expliquer c'est quoi le trauma. Donc, small t, big T, trauma is not the event that happened to you. It is how your nervous system reacted to that experience. Yes, Ashna.
Madam, can someone experiencing a traumatic event at the age of, mettons, 14, 15, est-ce qu'il est capable de toujours avoir une pensée dans le living adulte?
Ça veut dire que trauma when it happens, toutes les expériences. Allez, je donne un exemple. Un exemple that one of the authors used is, il y avait une personne qui était, au fait, moi répondre à la question. So many things come up, but I have to structure whatever is coming up in my brain. Ça veut dire que quelque chose qui se passe, a trauma that happened, que ce soit early childhood, adolescence, c'est dans votre brain. C'est quelque part, ça a pris, it's part of your brain. And you might think you are okay. You think, mais ouais, j'ai pu surmonter, I have coped well. But it will influence how you react at times in your life. C'est là durant votre vie. Parce que how do we know that? C'est à travers les recherches. Par exemple, je dis là, par exemple, la thérapie qu'on utilise, une des thérapies qu'on utilise pour le trauma, c'est le EMDR, Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing Therapy. Ça a commencé, ça a débuté dans les années 80 à peu près, EMDR. One of the modalities, c'est-à-dire one treatment that works with trauma. There are other types of therapy that works with trauma. But one of the best is EMDR. C'est-à-dire quand on fait un EMDR, par exemple, là je vous montre comment on sait comment les traumas, ça reste et ça influence la façon dont vous réagissez. Par exemple, la façon que vous réagissez avec votre famille might be influenced by your previous, not might, it is influenced by your previous experiences. Sometimes you're not reacting to what they say, you're reacting to something else. Donc, EMDR, par exemple, quand vous faites le EMDR therapy with a client, you will see they will talk, like I have done it with adolescents who have been abused and who have been sexually abused by a family member. And when we did EMDR, because they couldn't talk about it, it's just during adolescence. It happened during their childhood, like primary school years, but then during adolescence, it hit them. C'est-à-dire pendant qu'ils faisaient la puberté, peut-être 17 ans, là, ils ont changé le comportement. Like it came back to them. So we did EMDR, several sessions, and then while doing EMDR, il y a des expériences qui remontent. Et une des expériences qui est remontée, c'était quand la personne avait 5-6 ans, where an uncle was grooming the child. Grooming, ça veut dire que, comment dire, embêter l'enfant pour invite some sexual contact. Donc, la réaction de la personne, comment la personne réagit maintenant, c'est par rapport à tout ce qui est passé auparavant, qui a accumulé. So, if something happened before, it will influence your response now. Even maybe it's not traumatic, but how you perceive things. Sometimes, for instance, say in your family, your one of the members talking to you about something and you get overreact. You overreact. You don't know why you're overreacting. Just think about it. Why are you overreacting? What did he or she say? What's in the words? Does it remind you of something? Is it the tone? Is it something that's happening now? Are you reacting to what they are saying now? Or is it something that happened to you earlier that you were unable to express, but now you're expressing yourself? Donc, je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à la question, mais ce qui se passe, c'est que pas que l'adolescent, mais ça nous arrive à tous, c'est-à-dire de réagir pas sur l'instant, c'est-à-dire pas ce qui se passe dans l'instant, mais plus ce qui s'est passé auparavant. Like we were unable to defend ourselves, but we are reacting now because this has triggered something in us. So, ça veut dire s'il y a eu du traitement du traumatic experience, there has been some kind of treatment, they might or might not get triggered, but triggered parce que le traitement, c'est complexe. C'est complexe, ça prend du temps, depending on what type of trauma it is, again. Mais tant qu'il y a le soutien around, there is some kind of support, ça aide beaucoup pour que quelque chose ne devienne pas traumatique. Have I answered your questions? En même temps, c'est intéressant parce que j'allais vous expliquer ça pour la suite aussi. Oui, I wanted to vous montrer le manuel. You can see your manual. Yeah, there are two definitions. One of childhood sexual abuse. You can see the manual. You hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Ok, vous m'entendez, vous voyez le manuel. Donc, dans le livre, dans le manuel, il y a une définition de childhood sexual abuse, c'est tout ce qui est enfant, et là, c'est sur sexual assault, sexual abuse. Et il y a une différence parce que là, c'est entre enfant et adulte ou enfant et someone significantly older, and this is between adults. Donc, le sexual assault is a type of sexual victimization which is considered sexual harassment, unwanted verbal or physical sexual advances that occur in workplace or academic environment. Donc, il y a le sexual harassment can be quid pro quo or hostile environment. Quid pro quo is someone in a position of power who offers some kind of reward in exchange of sexual favors. Hostile environment is when other people's words or actions of a sexual nature have the effect of creating a hostile or abusive environment. Donc là, on voit les consequences of sexual abuse, ça on a vu. Donc on a vu le physical, le psychological distress, anxiety, phobia, women, lifetime of substance abuse. And eating disorders. Certain types of eating disorders were associated with abuse. Women with a history of abuse report more adult sexual behaviors. C'est-à-dire, ils prennent des risques, earlier intercourse, greater number of partners, higher rate of unintended pregnancies, and aborted pregnancies. So for women, it's more like lifetime substance abuse, earlier sexual intercourse, numerous partners, health risk, risky behaviors, et unintended pregnancies, et also aborted pregnancies. Et puis medical problems such as chronic pelvic pain, headache, gastrointestinal disorders are associated with experience of having been sexually abused. So these are long-term. And as we see, it's more studies focused on female. Mais par contre, là, on a vu les characteristics of male survivors. Donc, while research have focused on female, some studies have shown that male survivors experience consequences on their lives. But counseling need for male survivors differ from that of female. 9 factors which affect representation of male survivors. Reluctance to seek treatment due to the belief that men are not victims. Donc on pense que men are not victims, they cannot be victims because physiologically they have to be, to want it, but they are victims. So there is reluctance to seek treatment because we think they are not victims. Minimizations of experience of victimization. Because they think that being with an older woman is a privilege. And that victimization by male reflects that they are gay, for instance. So if you think it is a privilege, so if you think there has been abuse, so it's because you have a problem. So we are blaming the victim here. Shame-based personality characteristic may result in one's perceived failure to protect oneself. So because physically men are supposed to be stronger, so there's some kind of shame. Shame, ça veut dire c'est quelque chose sur c'est pas guilt comme j'ai fait, la différence entre guilt and shame. Shame is about our own self. Shame about who we are. Donc, shame-based personality may result in one's perceived failure to protect oneself. Integrity. The exaggerated effort to reassert masculine identity. Because we fail, donc là, ce sont les caractéristiques of male survivors, how they show up in counseling, how they present themselves. Like I said, first is they are reluctant to seek treatment. Secondly, it is believed that they are not victim because it is a privilege to have sexual intercourse with an older woman. Shame-based personality, that is, they are ashamed of themselves because they fail to protect themselves. And they try to assert their masculine identity more because they have failed to protect themselves. En même temps, il y a ceux qui ont des difficulties with male identity. Donc, there's some kind of rejection of anything that is female, such as emotional intimacy. They can't get emotionally intimate because it's perceived as something feminine. So they have male identity, c'est quoi? Faut savoir, male identity is not just about being a male, being a macho. It's also about your feelings, about being intimate. So they have difficulties with this male identity because they want to avoid anything that is feminine. There is confusion about sexual identity. They don't know whether they are homosexual, heterosexual, because depending, especially if they have been abused by male, if perpetrators were also male, so might get some confusion about their sexual identity. Behavior patterns with power and control. Donc, to compensate for these moments of powerlessness during the abuse, they might, externalize their behavior. They might want to have more power and control in their relationship. Externalization of feelings due to social prescriptions. Donc, plus de acting up, de misbehaving, comme on peut dire, c'est-à-dire behaving aggressively, but not express their feelings. They won't express it, but they will act on it. Vulnerability to compulsive behaviors. Due to attempt to deny feelings by excessive involvement with project, with task-oriented activities. Couple the compulsive behaviors. Compulsive behaviors come with obsessive thoughts. Compulsive behaviors. Avant qu'il y ait des compulsive behaviors, there are thoughts that come before that. C'est-à-dire, il y a des obsessive thoughts which result in compulsive behaviors. Donc, they tend to have compulsive behaviors because there are some kind of obsessive thoughts about, say, they want to deny their feelings. They are involved in more activities. Like normally, compulsive behaviors, you can see like someone with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorders. Bon, il y a plusieurs types de obsessive compulsive disorders, but to name a few, those that will close the door several times or check whether they have closed the door, the windows, such that it impedes their daily living. C'est-à-dire, c'est pas quelque chose de... Faut pas penser we are OCDs. There are certain levels that really impede your proper functioning. Donc, vulnerability to compulsive behaviors, c'est-à-dire vulnerability to obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, due to attempts to deny feelings by excessive involvement into activities. Donc, ça, ce sont les 9 points de présentation de male survivors. How do they present themselves? Oh, okay, it was small. Okay, sorry. This is in your manual, the false memory debate. Counselors working with... Pourquoi on dit counselors? Because in this book, it's a book for counselors, but you can expand whoever's working with sexual abuse, social workers, counselors. Work with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse may confront issues raised by the controversy linked to the phenomenon of recovered memories. Il faut savoir que, like everyday experiences, you encode things through your senses, your smell, taste, through all your senses. This is, it gets encoded, you process it into your brain, etc. It goes into memory, sometimes you forget. Ça, c'est normal processing, how you process information that comes to you. Mais traumatic experience does not process the same way. C'est-à-dire, when there is a trauma, there is so much energy that your brain goes offline. C'est comme si c'est comme si un volcan. And this, whatever you have sense through, like anything through senses, will be scattered around. The narrative will be, ça va être flou un peu. Donc, it is not, a traumatic experience is not processed the same way as everyday experiences. C'est pourquoi someone who has been through trauma, they might remember things later on. A smell can trigger something, a sound can trigger something, or a vision, or a memory. Anything can come up, come up at the moment unexpectedly. Why this happens is because your brain wants to heal. So it will send you ces bribes d'informations qui a été éparpillé. C'est comme le volcan qui a éclaté et il y a le lava partout. Donc, ces informations sont ramenées dans votre cerveau for you to heal. But what happens when we get those information filled with traumatic energy? We get triggered. Mais why do your brain bring those information to you? It's for you to process it. Quand on dit process, ça veut dire to heal from it et d'aller de l'avant. Donc, comme je dis, traumatic experience get processed differently. That's why people might recall things they were not that were not previously remembered. Donc, c'est quoi le false memory debate? It has three issues. Can trauma be forgotten and remembered? The accuracy and credibility of memories of childhood sexual abuse. The role of therapists can influence memory. Certains pensent que, mais ces experts-là, de plus en plus, bon, ces études-là, c'est 2008, mais maintenant, with neuroscience, clinical science, psychiatry, psychiatrist, clinical field, neuroscience and all, on a pu combiner toutes ces connaissances-là pour avoir bien plus d'idées, d'éclaircissements sur what happens when there is trauma. So we know more now than we knew before. Donc, c'est quoi traumatic experiences? Quand on parle de overwhelming, c'est quelque chose qui est au-delà de vos ressources. Ça veut dire que vous êtes submergé par ces expériences-là. You feel like drowning. Donc, traumatologists argue that memories of traumatic experiences, which are defined as overwhelming events outside of a realm of normal experience, are encoded, stored, and retrieved differently than our memories for ordinary events. Traumatic memories do not fit existing cognitive schemata. C'est-à-dire votre façon de penser, your belief system, comment vous procédez, like whatever happens around you, you get it through your senses, you process it, you connect it with previous knowledge. Ça se fait tellement vite que vous ne réalisez pas, tout ça se passe. And then you build a schema for that experience, or you tend to vous allez l'associer avec d'autres expériences similaires. Il y a des associations qui se font dans votre cerveau. Mais pour traumatic memories, they do not fit existing cognitive schema. They cannot be integrated with ordinary verbal autobiographical memory. Donc, it cannot be integrated into your memory, into your presentation of yourself. Donc, traumatic memory loss is one type of defense dissociation. On parle de 4 parameters of experience: behavior, affect, it's your feelings, somatic sensation, your physical sensation, and your knowledge. These are 4 parameters of experience. When a person experiences a traumatic event, these parameters of experience can become disconnected. C'est vraiment, a trauma is like so much energy that your brain gets disconnected. There is some kind of disconnection. Dans le field of trauma, we call it traumatic experience like a brain injury. Donc, le disconnection is your brain pour vous aider ça. C'est une façon c'est une défense pour vous aider à ne pas succomber à this energy. Donc, these are defensive associations. We will go into detail maintenant. Ne vous inquiétez pas, you are not expected to know this. It's just for your knowledge to understand what happens when there is a traumatic experience. Your normal range, this is like us. We are cool, we are calm. Like if I say, I ask a question, if I ask a question or if I ask a question and you have to answer, like you have to unmute yourself and answer, maybe some of you or all of you might get a little anxious pour parler. Donc, il y a une activation. This is called your sympathetic nervous system will get activated. Like you have to talk, there's a little stress, which is manageable. And then, vous avez fini de répondre, je dis c'est très bien, tout ça. You cool down, you settle. Ça, c'est le sympathy. And when you feel relaxed, I say, just take some deep breath. These deep breaths, they act on your parasympathetic nervous system. Ça veut dire que là, c'est cool, c'est relax. And still you're within your range. C'est just, ça forme partie, c'est regulated. You feel it like, say your boss says, on a un nouveau travail, il faut le faire, il faut compléter avant demain. Donc, un petit stress, but still you know you're able to do it. Your sympathetic nervous system is on. And then you complete it before 4 o'clock. You're relaxed. You say, okay, tomorrow Saturday, I'm going to chill, etc. Donc là, vous êtes relax. Le parasympathique. Le parasympathique, c'est côté relaxation, digestion, cool down. If you're into meditation, into relaxation, là, c'est le parasympathique qui domine. Sympathique, c'est plus qu'on est actif, we have things to do, a little stress, we have to get things to work out. C'est ça, c'est le sympathique. Donc ça, c'est une petite portion de ce qui se passe in your nervous system. Again, we take this, ce diagramme-là, là, on va compliquer les choses. Donc, this is how you normally will act. Dans la vie, il y a un petit stress et puis on relaxe. Il y a des choses à faire et puis we feel good. Donc, we go on and on and on every minute, every second. And when it is within this window, we call it a window, you are performing optimally. Ça veut dire que même s'il y a des stress, tout ça, mais you're able to cope. Par contre, when there is a traumatic event, then you get dysregulated. Ça veut dire ça va au-delà de votre capacité. Là, vous voyez, la personne est stuck. It's not just go up and down, but you get stuck over some time. Hyperarousal is too much energy in your body, too much energy, you're hyper-aroused. C'est là l'anxiété, you're hyper-vigilant. C'est-à-dire, attention qu'il se passe quelque chose, tout ça, hyper-vigilance. Pas possible de se relaxer. And there is, normally, the effect is not just psychological, it is also physical. You will have problem to digest things. There is emotional flooding, too much feelings, chronic pain, sleeplessness, hostility, rage. Donc, c'est quelque chose qui vous affecte mentalement, ça va vous affecter là, complètement. C'est-à-dire psycho, social, and also physically. Donc, je reviens. This is within this window, c'est qui est des tirets noirs là. Ça, c'est within this window, you are performing at an optimal level. This is us going on with life, normal life. There are some kind of stress, daily stress, but it is manageable. Whereas when there is a traumatic event, it will disrupt our normal reactions. And the way it is encoded is differently. C'est-à-dire, une personne qui est stuck here, they will show anxiety, they will show hypervigilance because there is too much energy in their body. They are unable to process things, donc psychological issues, but also physical complaint, comme on dit ça, somatic complaint, comme des chronic pain, digestive problem. Surtout chronic pain, hein, chronic, ça veut dire que it has been ongoing throughout their lives. C'est-à-dire que vous allez voir que c'est souvent en dehors, ça porte souvent à l'extérieur du optimal arousal. Someone who is stuck on off, par exemple, they show no effect, no affect, flat affect, ça veut dire ils sont, on va pas dire neutre dans la façon qu'ils s'expriment, mais it's flat, no emotions. Or they are numb, on appelle ça numb, ça veut dire que they are really lost. They are some kind of disconnected with others. And they will say they don't feel connected with people around them. There's a chronic fatigue. They are dissociated. C'est quoi dissociated? There are normal dissociation. For instance, là, je suis en train d'expliquer. Je sais, il est quelle heure? 10h moins 5 à peu près. From our start till now, you had many episodes of daydreaming, which is normal. Daydreaming, ça veut dire que ça c'est normal, daydreaming. Mais someone who feels dissociated, the daydreaming are more prolonged, depending on the level of dissociation. Ça veut dire high dissociation, c'est relié à certaines choses traumatisantes. High dissociation, for instance, they might follow a class, but then at the end, they forget that they have followed the class or they forget that they have done such and such things. This is the type of dissociation we are talking about. People who do things and they really don't remember doing these things. Par exemple, un adolescent qui fait un test à l'école et se dit, mais est-ce que j'ai fait le test, moi? Because they were not present mentally. Bon, heureusement qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup, mais il y a des personnes qui souffrent de dissociation. Dissociation is linked to something else. So, someone who is stuck on the hypoarousal, it's more difficult to work with them because they are numb. They are not present with us. We have to constantly bring them back to the room. Donc, on appelle ça le Windows of Tolerance. Je ne l'ai pas écrit, le Windows of Tolerance. Let me... So I'm sharing the whiteboard. Donc, le Windows of Tolerance. It shows... un instant. Donc, Windows of Tolerance, c'est venu... Qui nous a proposé ça? C'était le docteur Dan Siegel. C'est un des grands thérapeutes qui a proposé le Windows of Tolerance. Donc, lui, il parle de optimal zone of arousal, c'est-à-dire normal functioning adults or children, human, perform within and optimal zone. C'est ça le windows of tolerance. When there is some kind of traumatic event, it disrupts their normal function. Now, so someone who is hyperarousal, you see, there is anxiety, hypervigilance. Someone who is stuck on off, hyperarousal. Donc hypo, ça c'est manque d'énergie, depressed, disconnected. Okay. Now, this, c'est juste pour vous montrer quelque chose. En fait, when there is a traumatic experience or you're anxious, you have some kind of strong feelings, there is fear, there is anxiety, or there is traumatic event, this part of your brain, c'est-à-dire derrière votre front là, this part of your brain, you have limited access. C'est-à-dire que when there is some kind of trauma or you are anxious, you are threatened, you feel there's some kind of fear, you have limited access to this portion of your brain. Par exemple, imaginez dans la classe, un enfant a peur de son professeur. Cet enfant qui a peur de son professeur-là ne peut pas penser clairement. Déjà, un enfant est en voie de développement. C'est-à-dire que this part is still developing. They have limited access to this. It means they cannot think properly. You don't have access to your higher thinking brain, but decision-making brain. You don't have access. What you have access, c'est là, the back of your brain. Okay, can you see my laser point? This, derrière votre front, on appelle ça le prefrontal cortex. Le prefrontal cortex, when there is a traumatic event, you have limited access to this part of your brain because all energy is here. Ça, c'est le primitive brain. C'est développé avant. And when there is a traumatic event, your brain will summon all energy for survival. This is for survival. C'est-à-dire, est-ce que je m'enfuis? Est-ce que I fight back? Or I feign death? Comme les animaux qui font semblant de mourir. These are our responses to stress. Do I fight back? Imagine in abuse, do we fight back? Fight back, run away, feign death. This is part of a brain that mobilized all this energy. So there is less energy here. When there is less energy here, ce qui se passe, difficulté de concentration, limited attention, cannot think well, cannot decisions. C'est souvent when there is too much fear, anxiety, etc., on n'arrive pas. Par exemple, prenez un exemple, c'est you had a bad news at work, a bad news like, let's say, take an example of when your boss humiliated you in front of your colleagues. So you felt, comme on a dit, déconnecté, sweaty palm, a heartbeat faster, etc. You had limited access to this part of the brain. Here was more activated, like, ça peut être inconscient, c'est pas conscient, c'est-à-dire vous n'êtes pas conscient que ça se passe. It's a reaction of your brain. You don't have a saying that you cannot force your brain to work here. So your brain this part will get activated. Like, for instance, you feel immobilized, you cannot move, you feel paralyzed. Or sometimes other people might just run away, just walk away out of this experience. Or someone might fight back or reply back. But here you have limited access. So if this happens, for instance, you don't, n'essayez pas de prendre des décisions hâtives parce que you don't have access to this part of your brain. C'est-à-dire que just sleep on it, for instance, le lendemain, you will have more access to this, you'll be able to have a clearer picture. But if it's a trauma, you still won't have access to this because it's not processed well. It might take weeks before you are able to really understand what's happening. So, c'est ça qui est important quand vous savez qu'il y a trop d'émotions qui est là. Take some time because you don't have access to this spot. So your decisions won't be informed, won't be clear enough. Bon, ça, c'est juste à lire, mais c'est pas très... C'est juste false memory proponents. Donc, ça, vous pouvez lire, ça vous explique que des fois, some memories, they can be suggested. For instance, for children, you can tell them things have happened this way. They think that these are their memories. Alors que ça, par exemple, vous pouvez raconter à votre enfant, tu as été un enfant comme ça, tu étais très... vous racontez l'expérience, l'enfant va penser qu'il a vécu cette expérience. Donc, c'est ça ce qu'on dit. Est-ce que childhood experiences, if we are doing sessions with a child, is it really what happened to them or what people told them? It's a false memory. Mais nous, en tant que thérapeute, we are careful with what we say in session. We don't suggest things have happened. We let the person talk. So please read this. On va parler en détail. Ça, vous pouvez lire pour comprendre comment un counselor has le counselor, par sa façon de faire, a mis les idées dans la tête du client. They were more suggestive than letting the client speak. Donc, you can read that. Some approaches that we use with child sexual abuse are CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, integrative behavioral approach, creative therapy, and narrative therapy. Donc, we have to do narrative therapy in less than 25 minutes. Narrative therapy. Narrative therapy originated by Epstein and Michael White. Michael White was social worker, an Austrian social worker. Si vous tapez Michael White, you will see he has an organization in Australia. And his wife is still doing the work. Like I said last time, this year, Cheryl White came to Mauritius to train some people in an NGO. So I had the chance of meeting Cheryl White and David Denborough, who are directors of the center in Australia. So they really believe in narrative therapy. Their approach is different. Like they live the narrative therapy in the true sense. So narrative therapy, it's the belief that people give meaning to their lives and relationship through stories. Donc, imaginez un client qui vient dans votre in your office, and you will start by greeting them, giving them a space to sit. You will show all the person-centered qualities, and then you say, what brings you here? The person will talk about the issues. So in narrative therapy, we'll say they are telling their story. Et through your questioning, you will have narrative questions. En fait, c'est ça l'intervention, c'est narrative questions. Narrative questions are questions that do not blame the person. Questions that do not highlight the deficit of the person. These are questions that are more empowering. So through your questioning, the person will retell their story. Pas retell pour raconter la même histoire, mais imaginez la personne raconte son histoire. Et vous avez des questions pour préciser qu'est-ce qui se passe, des questions qu'on appelle clarification questions. For instance, when someone is telling their story, you want to know, but what happened before that? This is a question. Why did he react this way? This is a question. So you're telling questions to help the person retell their story. Donc, pour Michael White, il y a des problèmes dans la société, par exemple. And people are recruited into those problems. C'est-à-dire que les problèmes sociétals qui impactent sur les personnes. Okay, I have a question from Rohan. When we say stories, what do we refer to? Imaginative ones or those events what person has lived? It is those events. We say stories. Story is a métaphore, en fait. C'est pas il va raconter des histoires du tout, c'est juste il va raconter son histoire. Par exemple, imaginez, vous êtes en session. Vous êtes en session, and I tell you what brings you here. You will tell me, normally you will tell me issues, because you see a therapist whenever you have issues. But sometimes if you have a relationship with a therapist, like professional relationship, over time, you might come to also share positive things that happen in session, in your life. So when you come into session, I say, what brings you here? You will tell me what happened into your life. So what you are telling me is your story. C'est votre histoire. C'est votre histoire. C'est-à-dire, your experiences are your stories. You don't have one story. You have many stories. You have a story for work, for instance. Je vais simplifier. Story, what happens at work. A story, what happens at home. A story, what happens in your relationship. Now, a story, what happens at work. You might have different stories stories that show your strength, stories that show that you are someone that can bounce back, that can start fresh, a new job. So we have many stories in our life. These are your experiences. That's a metaphor we use, is stories. So when you will tell me your story, you will highlight things that did not work into your life. That's what we get in session. Qu'est-ce qui se passe pas? Quelles sont les choses qui ne vont pas de votre vie? C'est ça ce qu'on amène dans les sessions normalement. But therapists will try. Doing therapy means to see the untold story, c'est-à-dire ce qui n'a pas été dit à travers les questions. Et si vous racontez que les problèmes, you're showing only one side of a story. Okay, Devika nous dit, when you ask that person this story and he starts relating, it does not make him live that experience again and bring him much anxiety to him. Très bonne question, parce que it depends on the problem. Hein? Narrative therapy, it is used for certain issues, not all. Let me see. For sexual abuse, you can use narrative therapy. But, comment dire? When we start doing a session, let's say, je dois bien formuler pour que vous compreniez. Let me use Blackboard to help me. Whiteboard. Okay. You see my whiteboard. Narrative therapy, I'm typing narrative therapy. We use narrative therapy. Your first question will be, what brings you here? What, for instance, what brings you here? So you are opening a space. On this space, c'est relational space. Hein? A relational space for the client to talk about what's about the issues that bring them. Okay, opening space. They will start telling their story. But narrative therapy, quand vous essayez avec les questions, c'est très person-centered, c'est très... c'est fait pour que la personne ne se sente pas diminuée. Okay? C'est-à-dire la personne va parler de ces issues. But if a person talks about sexual abuse, you won't be asking about what happened. What happened during the abuse? These are not questions we ask. Narrative therapy is the person tells their story. Stories, because we have different stories. When I say stories, it's about their life. Be it work, be it personal, anything they are sharing that is in relation to the goal of a session. Because people come to see you for certain goals. You have to co-create certain goals for the session. normalement. What brings you here? On dit what brings you here, c'est il va raconter son histoire, n'est-ce pas? Tell their story, anything. Then, basé sur ce qu'il dit, ou ce qu'elle dit, you will co-create goals. Then you will say, do you think these would be the goals of our next sessions? Là, vous allez travailler dessus. You will work with the feelings. You will work comme pour le sexual abuse. You won't tell them what happened before. Why did he do that? No, these are not therapeutic questions. Narrative therapy, don't ask questions about the abuse, about the event, what happened. Comme la question, c'est bien que vous avez mentionné cette question, parce que we don't want them to relive that experience. We want to help them with their story. C'est-à-dire, ça, c'est narrative therapy. Parce que on ne va pas travailler avec le trauma. We are working with their feelings and all that. Mais le trauma, c'est pour ça que there are other best methods to work with trauma that are non-narrative, on appelle ça. Non-narrative, c'est, par exemple, EMDR, you don't have to talk about the experience of trauma. It's just the therapy will desensitize your triggers so that you don't feel triggered every time certain things happen into your life. Donc, pour abuse and trauma, we prefer non-verbal, non-narrative therapies. Pour qu'il n'y ait pas. Et puis, bringing much anxiety, la question c'était, when you ask that person his story, starts relating, does it make them feel that experience again and bring much anxiety? If we are working, like say, we are co-creating goals and we see that client talk about sexual abuse and trauma, we might refer them to a psychotherapist for the trauma. We won't work with that part. Because to work with trauma, there are certain skills required to calm down the person before working with their trauma. We don't work directly with the trauma. We have to take several sessions et on doit voir que la personne est prête à ce moment-là. We work with their trauma. Donc, sexual abuse, you might refer them if we don't have expertise because it might do more harm. Par exemple, seulement, par contre, auparavant, dans les années 80-90, ce que les thérapeutes nous racontaient, c'est qu'auparavant, ils pensaient que quand la personne parle, raconte, they were cured because they didn't know what technique to use. At that time, they thought that catharsis, talking about your things that happen to your life, letting your emotions flow, will get you healed. Qui est en train de rayer sur ma page? Donc, but this made things worse. Surtout, on faisait ce type de thérapie avec les vétérans, ceux qui ont été à la guerre. But things were worse. Merci. Ouais, si vous pouvez effacer le truc. Donc, narrative therapy, you open space for them to tell their story, to tell what happens to them, and you co-create their goals of the session. What will we work on these issues? We co-create goals. If person mention about sexual abuse, we reassure them, like we say that this, comme si très, comment dire, be empathetic, etc. Mais les rassurer aussi que voilà, you will refer them to a psychotherapist for the trauma because it necessitates specific treatment. Chaque problème, il y a des traitements spécifiques that works best parce que les études ont démontré que bon, CBT, for instance, work best for this one, for certains problèmes. Le EMDR for trauma, le motivational for addiction. Donc, we have to know and to use the best, the evidence-based. Evidence-based, c'est quoi? Evidence-based, c'est that have proven to work. C'est ça, evidence-based practices. Hein? Bon, le narrative therapy. Let's go back. Donc, Michael White, David Epstein, they were the ones who originated the narrative therapy, social workers who contributed greatly. Narrative therapy is not common in Mauritius. And so I'm trying to teach every batch of narrative therapy because one, it came, ça a été originated by a social worker, and it's really interesting to work with this type of therapy. The first thing that Michael White mentioned was that the person is not the problem. Ça veut dire the person is not the problem. Ça veut dire que like we psychologists, we make assessment. We see what's going wrong with that person. We see whether they lag behind on their development. We see whether they are depressed, they are anxious. So we are looking at things that's not working with the client. Mais Michael White dit que the person is not the problem. The problem is the problem. C'est-à-dire que le problème, c'est là. La personne, c'est une personne à part entière. C'est le problème, pardon. Le problème est là. And people were recruited into that problem. C'est-à-dire que you are not the problem is here. You're a person who is experiencing some short-term problem, for instance. Parce qu'il prend le social justice principle. Social justice principle veut dire que pour lui, à cause, par exemple, de l'oppression, discrimination, des stéréotypes, people are recruited into problems. Et pour narrative practitioners, they think that people's experiences of problems are shaped by stories. C'est-à-dire, whatever your story are, when you're into session, imaginez vous êtes dans la session, racontez votre problème. Votre problème is how you perceive things. Your perception of things has shaped, it's a construction, how you perceive your problems. Vous pouvez avoir différentes façons de voir le même problème. Donc, votre histoire, c'est la façon que vous avez construit votre histoire. Donc, c'est une histoire construite par vous, par vos perceptions, vos expériences, vos sens. This is one way of looking at things. Quand j'ai dit the person, qu'est-ce que j'ai dit? The person is not the problem is the problem. Cette phrase-là, ça nous ramène à aider le client, help the client view themselves as separate from their problem. C'est un des termes qu'on utilise dans le narrative therapy, is externalizing the problem. C'est par exemple une personne qui souffre de solitude, par exemple. Let's say, une personne qui souffre de solitude. Il va dire, je me sens seule, je me sens abandonnée par tout le monde. La personne vraiment là, feel all those feelings. How can you externalize the problem? First, you can, narrative therapy say, you can ask the client to name the problem. How would you name that solitude, for instance? Comment vous les... Certains vont dire, solitude même, ou bien on va dire, ce stranger. Okay, if we mention it about, they call it stranger. So we say, when this stranger comes into your life, what happens to you? Oh, when this stranger comes to my life, I feel terrible. How does this stranger impact your love life? Eh bien, je me sens seule, j'ai pas envie de rencontrer personne. Donc, la personne va raconter. Qu'est-ce qui se passe au fait when they are externalizing that? It's like, vous êtes en train de personnifier, c'est par exemple cette solitude. It could be depression, it could be anything. Vous personnifiez cette chose et quand le client est en train de raconter, they feel less frightened, they are less defensive. Par exemple, on prend ça pour le HIV. If a person has HIV, how would you name it if we have to rename that thing? Say the monster. Okay, we'll go with the monster. So how is the monster impacting your love life? Oh, since that monster came into my life, I don't know how to proceed with my new partners, for instance. How is it impacting your health? Since that monster came into my life, I'm unable to consume certain products, etc., etc. Donc, c'est là, n'importe quel problème, you can start by naming it. Sometimes people won't find it, like, vont dire, c'est le HIV, why would I rename it? Or sometimes people will just go with you, like they will rename it. And then, or if they just keep the name, you say, how does HIV impact your life? How does this virus makes you feel? Instead of how being positive impact you, like you're directly asking that question to the person. Ils peuvent être sur la défensive ou se sentir mal. C'est pour ça qu'on essaie de externalize the problem to help the person during session to feel at ease and less defensive. Là, c'est une façon de voir les étapes dans le narrative therapy. Firstly, you adopt a collaborative. Chaque terme, each word has a significance, au fait. Quand on dit adopt a collaborative, co-authoring, consultative position. Par exemple, collaborative, auparavant, les sessions étaient directives et more, comment dire, c'était, we give, pas advice, mais on dit de faire les choses. C'était less collaborative, more directive. But here it is collaborative. You make suggestion. If the client takes it up, it's okay. If not, you made other suggestion. C'est-à-dire, it has to be collaborative. They have a say in it. They can accept or not. So you adopt a collaborative. Co-authoring, ça veut dire que c'est co-construit. C'est le client et la thérapeute qui font les choses. It's not just a passive session, it's an active session. Donc, collaborative, co-authoring, consultative position. That's how we adopt it. They consult us, we co-create with them, we collaborate. Ça, c'est premièrement. And we have all the person-centered qualities, empathy, congruence, qu'est-ce qu'il y a encore? Empathy, congruence, j'ai oublié. Anyone? You have done this person-centered therapy. No? You make the person... Oui?
Trust?
Oui. C'est building the trust, the therapeutic aliens. C'est-à-dire là, n'importe quelle session, n'importe quelle thérapie, que ce soit narrative, que ce soit cognitive behavior therapy, anything you do, you need to have these therapeutic aliens. C'est-à-dire empathy, trust, tout ça. So it's how you behave or how you act in session. So this is first thing. You help the client view themselves as separate from their problem by externalizing the problem. Try to externalize the problem. Comment j'ai dit? J'ai dit you can ask them to name the problem, and then you ask how the problem is impacting their life, their love life, their everyday life, their work, etc. Then you help them pinpoint times in their lives when they were not affected by their problems. C'est ça le terme unique outcomes. C'est par exemple, même si la personne a le HIV, on va dire, are there times when this monster, because we have to rename it as monster for HIV, are there times when this monster did not or does not affect your work life? Then they will say, yes, whenever I'm engrossed into my statistics, I feel so, I'm so concentrated, I feel so relieved that all those thoughts do not come across. Ok, so, ça veut dire que vous savez qu'il y a des moments que c'est pas tout le temps que ça l'affecte. Are there times when anger did not take over your take over control, take control over you? Surtout avec les adolescents, on demande, are there times when anger did not take control over you? They will say, yes, I was able to manage my emotions and not to act upon it. So these are unique outcomes, times when they were not oppressed by their issues, their problems. Ça, c'est... Après, il y a aussi thickening client's description of these unique outcomes. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Ça veut dire, on va demander encore, dites-moi les différents, par exemple, different times when you were able to manage your emotions, you were able to, comment dire, overcome those issues. You are thickening the descriptions of those unique outcomes. Comme je dis, unique outcomes are times when they were able to beat their problem. Ce sont des termes qu'on utilise dans le narrative therapy. So you should use those terms like story. The client will tell their story, externalizing their problem, finding unique outcomes. And then link the unique outcomes to other events. Par exemple, l'enfant qui me dit, oh yes, I was able to manage my emotions and not accompany and not beat my classmate. So I will say, okay, this week, can you use those strategies you used last week? And we will see next week whether it has worked. So we are linking their strength, the unique outcome, to something that will happen in the future. C'est-à-dire, si tu as la capacité de le faire, tu l'as fait. Tu peux le faire après, tu peux le faire dans une autre circonstance. Ensuite, le narrative therapy, c'est-à-dire, par exemple, si je fais narrative therapy with a client over 10, 12 sessions, après la 10e session, par exemple, I can ask them, because they have progressed, they have learned many things, I can ask them to invite significant members of their social network. It could be of their family, their friends, someone who is close to them, someone significant. It could be family, friends, neighbors, or anyone who is close to them and they want to share that experience with them. It will be more like, dans les dernières sessions, c'est juste, je peux faire un certificat mentionnant tous les strengths du client, because throughout the sessions, I have seen them grow, develop skills, so I will mention all the skills. Et puis, on va faire, c'est comme une cérémonie. Voilà, donner ce certificat et la personne qui est chère au client va témoigner de ça, c'est-à-dire va être présent pour voir cette cérémonie. This is narrative therapy. In session, we use narrative therapy also outside, like even in our interaction with others. Et puis, donc, si par exemple la personne a pu surmonter sa colère, we can ask them, can I share this knowledge with other clients who are struggling with the same problem? So la personne peut me donner la permission, donc je pourrais suggérer cette méthode-là à d'autres personnes. Et puis, le narrative therapy is also about connecting people with support group. For instance, if someone has been abused or someone has lost someone, we connect them with a group of therapy for group sessions or connect them with people who are undergoing similar situations so they can have a group of support. Donc, ça, c'est le narrative therapy practices. These are the main points. But please read the articles. There are other stuff that is covered. And ça va vous aider un peu plus d'aller approfondir, d'aller au-delà. Parce que if you Google it, you will find a few things, just a few things. But in the articles, it's quite complete. Donc, c'est un peu ça, narrative therapy. Je pense qu'on a dépassé notre heure. We'll take some minutes for break, and we use the other link. Any questions before we close?
Non, madame.
C'est bon, parfait. Donc, on se voit dans une dizaine de minutes. See you later.